Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Scientist. My name is Reed Corbett. I'm Dean of Integrated Coastal Programs and Executive Director here at the Coastal Studies Institute. So again, thank you for joining us, and we're thrilled to have Lindsay Dubs with us tonight in the hot seat. And so before we jump right in, I wanted to take just a moment and to make you aware of an important event that's coming up next month. It's March 17th, and no, it's not St. Paddy's Day. In fact, what's happening on March 17th, in addition to St. Paddy's Day, is Pirate Nation Gives. This is a day of giving. It's a 24-hour fundraising event that's bringing ECU's community together to engage and give back to the university that we love. So I hope you will support ECU and support the Coastal Studies Institute and our integrated coastal programs. I hope you'll support our mission to bring researchers and students to focus on resources and conservation of resources along our coast. This is your opportunity to support our growth and the growth of our programs through a scholarship or through other priorities that we have, like housing. So I'll be sending out reminders, challenging you to participate in Pirate Nation Gives. So thank you. All right, so that was my plug. And so now let me introduce our guest in the hot seat tonight, Dr. Lindsay Dubs. Lindsay's got many different responsibilities around here at CSIs, wears many different hats, and so it'll take me a few minutes to go through them. So first, Lindsay is an associate research professor at University of Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. In fact, I wore my Carolina blue tonight in honor of Lindsay, and also to recognize that here at CSI, we do have multiple institutions represented, including Chapel Hill. So they're a great partner. So she's an associate research professor at Chapel Hill. She's the co-director of the Outer Banks Field Site, or I guess now you're director of the Outer Banks Field Site.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right? It's a Chapel Hill run program out here at the coast. And you're associate director of the North Carolina Renewable Ocean Energy Center program. Right? So 3 hats, along as everything else that you're doing. Right? So again, welcome. We appreciate you being here. I thought I'd start with just a few introductions of sort of your education background, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit more. Sure. But if I remember correctly, right, so you started at Tufts University in environmental science and ecology.
Biology and environmental studies.
All right,
close,
so that was close. That was close. And then moved on to Chapel Hill. And your degree in Chapel Hill, your master's and PhD is actually, it's in, what caught me by surprise, it has an engineering slant.
Yes.
Environmental science and engineering?
Yes.
Boom.
That's right.
All right,
Good memory.
so that's kind of an interesting background. And so we go from that into some of the work that you're currently doing, right? And so your current research focuses on the Gulf Stream ecology, with recently a lot of work in sargassum, not sarcasm, but sargassum, right? And your lab group has been working in the Gulf Stream and sort of with this ecology for 5 or more years, right? So thinking about your education background, some of the research you're doing, how do you get from there to here, right? So, what was the background that led you to what you're doing today?
Okay.
And you don't have to go through the whole 10 years, but
okay.
but how did you get here?
So, at Tufts, I studied biology and environmental studies, and while I was there, I was interested in marine sciences. That was kind of introduced before I got to Tufts. I had a wonderful teacher in high school who helped me do some independent studies, and one of them involved some time on a whale research vessel.
Oh, interesting.
I was almost completely incapacitated by seasickness the whole time, but I was still, some things don't change. But I was interested in marine sciences. So when I was at Tufts, there wasn't really much of a marine science program there or a coastal science program, but I was able to take class and have an internship at the New England Aquarium while I was there. So that allowed me to continue to dabble in that. And then from there, I did a year of service with AmeriCorps Cape Cod. So I was on the coast there, and I one of my jobs for AmeriCorps, one of my volunteer responsibilities was with the National Park Service up there.
So just to interrupt quickly, so that year volunteering, I think AmeriCorps actually pays some, don't they?
They give you a stipend towards graduate school,
And so how important do you think that was to leading you down this path?
I think that was really important because it was a environmental science AmeriCorps program, and so we got different placements depending on our interests, and I did have like kind of little glimpses, almost like internships into lots of different careers, including education, natural sciences, some leadership positions, and some group work where we were doing things like invasive species removal and things. So it allowed me to kind of see a suite of different environmental careers out there. And from that, I was most interested in the National Park Service work, which involved studying kettle ponds. And so I was interested in continuing with kind of studying the natural environment.
So those experiences, right? Those opportunities that we take, not necessarily in classes, but these experiential type opportunities can be key to figuring out, right, navigating what could be our career.
Yeah.
And so that year sort of helped lead you to where you are today.
It did, and I was considering Peace Corps, and I decided not to do Peace Corps after that. So it also kind of helps you understand what is not the right path for you.
Sure, right. That's another thing it can do is tell you what you don't like to do.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I kind of ended up at UNC Chapel Hill in a very roundabout manner. I was planning to continue down south to Florida to graduate school. And I was offered a job at UNC Chapel Hill Department of Environmental Sciences and Engineering, which is in the Gillings School of Global Public Health. And I was working in an organic chemistry lab with Howard Weinberg, and we were studying disinfection byproducts in drinking water. So that was really interesting, but again, like it was very chemistry heavy.
Now,
and
careful, I've got a chemistry degree.
Well, I love chemistry, I do, but I'm very bad at kind of memorizing things. I kind of like to understand them in a broader context, and so it didn't really work for me. But the rest of the program there, where there were engineers, and those engineers were addressing problems that were faced by humans with, in relationship to the environment.
Much more applied.
Yeah, and then the professor who I ended up working with there did more of the environmental science side of things. So Steve Whalen was my mentor, and so I did a master's degree with him in kind of like limnology and biogeochemistry, and I was studying
focused on lakes.
This was rivers.
Okay.
So my project was in the Cape Fear River, looking at phytoplankton primary production and the controls on it, so nutrients and light. And then when I was looking for a job after my master's degree, I was looking at a lot of jobs that were just going to be kind of in a laboratory, pipetting or something like that. That's what was available. And so Steve had two projects that had just been funded, one of which was in Alaska and one of which was in Duke Forest. And so he asked if I wanted to do a PhD project with him. So I did that, and I picked the project in the Duke Forest. So I was studying feedbacks between different greenhouse gases in a free air carbon exchange face site.
So looking at elevated CO2 in a forest.
Yeah, elevated CO2 and how it affected the whole forest ecosystem.
Right.
And so that was very interesting, and I had 4 years of funding from that project, but 3 years in, I kind of got sidetracked, and I got involved in the Daniel A. Oken chapter of Engineers Without Borders, and mostly because I spoke Spanish, and so I was their translator on their first trip, and we did a project in Peru trying to improve a water system there, or access to water in a small community. And that was partnered with a nonprofit called Moche. Anyway, I won't go too far into that, but it was a really interesting partnership where there were these engineering projects going on, and those were being funded by protection of cultural resources by this Moche project, which was an archaeological project at UNC Chapel Hill. So that kind of took me off track for a year. working on that project, but we succeeded in getting a water system installed in that community. It was a very rewarding project.
Sure.
And so when I got back to Chapel Hill, or when I got back to focusing on my dissertation work, I was out of funding. And so I did a teaching assistantship with my department for one semester, and then I needed one more semester, and I learned of an Institute for the Environment experiential education field site, that the Albemarle Ecological Field Site back then,
Right.
that was hosted by Coastal Studies Institute. And I applied for the job there to teach the ecology class, and I got the job. So I was back and forth between here and Chapel Hill every week.
Huh.
And
That's a drive.
it is a drive. But I enjoyed it so much that I came back after I finished my dissertation. I enjoyed working with the students. I loved being back teaching coastal ecology, ending up at the coast again after
Yeah.
going further inland.
And so your connections with CSI started with what is now the Outer Banks Field School.
Right. That's where it started. And, opportunities kind of just kept popping up that I had some sort of background
Right.
to line me up to be involved in them. So, and Mike Peeler involved me in a lot of his projects out here, which I really enjoyed. And then I met my husband, Corey Adams. And so I just gladly never left. I just stayed here.
Well, we're glad too.
Thank you.
Right? And so you sort of started, I guess, just teaching a course out here with the Outer Banks Field School, although named something different then. And so now you have all of these different hats, right? And so now you're certainly completely integrated into CSI and a key part of everything that we're doing. A lot of your early work, as well as the work that you're doing now in the Gulf Stream, is sort of biogeochemistry focused. You know, the idea of nutrients and sort of moving up the food chain. And so I'm curious, what sort of sparked that interest in biogeochemistry and understanding nutrients and the ecology and sort of the link between them?
So I think that part of the reason why biogeochemistry and ecosystem scale ecology appeal to me is because I just naturally think about systems, kind of. As I mentioned, I'm not very good at memorizing things unless I understand them in their context, and I really enjoy understanding complexity of systems and trying to understand them from kind of this complex ecosystem scale down, and biogeochemistry is a way to do that because you can measure fluxes of nutrients at all different scales and scale them up and down.
Makes a lot of connections.
It does make a lot of connections, yeah.
So a lot of your work at CSI has focused on the Gulf Stream. And last time we talked with Dr. Mike Mully about the Gulf Stream and how it's fairly unique, but the approach we took was from a physical oceanography approach primarily. And so as an ecologist, you're also interested in the Gulf Stream. And I think you would argue that it's also a fairly unique environment from an ecologist perspective. And so I'm curious, what is it that interests you? What sort of projects do you have going on focused on the Gulf Stream? And I'll probably interject and interrupt you multiple times.
Okay, that sounds good. Please do, and also if I get sidetracked, bring me back. So as Mike, I think, mentioned last month, the Gulf Stream has this massive volume of water that is traveling along our coast, more than all of the rivers in the world. And the really amazing thing about that as a biogeochemist and also as an ecologist is it's not just water. There are dissolved nutrients, there are particulate nutrients in that water, and then there are lots of organisms that are floating in the water column from the surface all the way down to the deepest depths, and there are deep water corals that are at the deepest depths. And then there are lots of migratory organisms that are kind of using that Gulf Stream to get to their next location and feeding along the way. So there are a lot of organisms moving through there. There are these edges of the Gulf Stream that are like fronts where you have sometimes upwelling of nutrients, where you have lots of productivity. And what was interesting when we started talking about the Gulf Stream with the Renewable Ocean Energy Program was I kind of assumed that there would be a lot of information about the ecology of the area because it is such an interesting place and we know that it should be biologically productive. And there certainly is some information out there, but not that much. And a lot of the information, a lot of the studies that were done there were done a long time ago. And there's been a lot of change since then. And so the things that I've been interested in are partially guided by the Renewable Ocean Energy Program. So I try and consider the protected organisms that are in that environment. And so that includes sea turtles, marine mammals, and also sargassum, a brown macroalgae that serves as a habitat.
And so, yeah, you've done a lot of work with the sargassum. And it's interesting because it's not that you're just going out there and doing work, and that habitat's critical, and maybe you could speak to that habitat, but also you're also bringing some of that back and doing interesting type mesocosm or microcosm or
a little bit of both.
A little both.
Yeah.
Back here in the lab. And so maybe speak just to the habitat and why that's unique and important. And then I'll ask another question.
Okay. Was there a picture of okay. So sargassum is really cool because it has lots of surfaces. And as a biogeochemist and studying microbiology, you know that surfaces get colonized by bacteria and algae. And so those surfaces have so much life on them, and there are so many endemic species. There was a study done back in, I think, the 70s that showed that there were probably 144 invertebrates that were associated with sargassum, and many of them are endemic, and they're only found there, and they look really similar to the sargassum. You have to really pick through to find them, because I don't study fish or invertebrates, really. I study bacteria and primary producers. So I leave them out there. And it's also, all of those surfaces also allow it to kind of clump together. And some of the times that John has come out and dove on the sargassum and taken photos underwater of it, you see that it extends pretty far under the surface. So there are little gas bubbles that kind of keep it afloat at the surface of the water where it's exposed to the sunlight that it needs for primary production, but it also kind of piles up and
creates structure in the water column, at the surface of the water column, which is unique.
Very unique for the pelagic ocean. And so it serves as habitat for juvenile fish as well. And then because there are so many little creatures in there, bigger creatures come to eat those little creatures. And then sea turtles, baby sea turtles kind of use it as a resting place as they travel. And pelagic birds also use it as a resting place. So it is a protected essential fish habitat.
Yeah, and so, you know, one of my favorite pictures here at CSI is a picture of you holding one of these little baby sea turtles, right? And so, you know, when I think about your background, you know, you've talked about biogeochemistry and nutrients, and here you are, you know, not playing because you don't play with turtles, right?
No.
But maybe it's releasing one of these
releasing
turtles, right?
a turtle,
so where's that connection? How is that connected to the work that you do?
So because one of my responsibilities for the Renewable Ocean Energy Program is to kind of consider the environmental impacts, I do focus on not just the organisms that I'm interested in for my research, but also those that we need to understand more about to make sustainable and responsible decisions about harnessing the energy from that environment.
Right, so just to remind people is that, you know, our program, the North Carolina Renewable Ocean Energy Program, is very interested in renewables off of our coast. One of those, and one of those really important ones, could be the Gulf Stream because of the amount of water that it's moving through.
Yes.
And if that would ever be used, you would need to consider the environment and the environmental implications.
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out. I forgot that context. So the things like the studies like with sea turtles, fortunately, I've found really wonderful partners to work with to help us get more information about how sea turtles are using the Gulf Stream. So I've worked with Larissa Avens, who is with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration down in Beaufort, and her whole group. And then she pulled in Kate Mansfield, she's at University of Central Florida, and she is the person who designed kind of this approach to putting small solar tags on juvenile sea turtles. And then we also partnered with the North Carolina aquariums, who raised the baby sea turtles that they had collected on beaches up to the size that we could tag them. And then our Star Center here at the Roanoke Island Aquarium hosted us to actually do the tagging so that we could do it in front of the public, because it's just such a cool experience. So it's not my expertise, but because of the program and my role in it, I am involved in these really fun things, and it does kind of feel like playing.
Right, but I mean, that's important to recognize, right? Is that although, yes, you're an ecologist, biogeochemist, you are doing work with a lot of different partners. It allows us as CSI, as well as your research group, to get involved in a lot of different things and make those strong partnerships to address the environmental questions that need to be asked, right? Especially if we are going to move forward and consider the Gulf Stream or waves, or you name that renewable resource, we need to consider the environmental implications.
Absolutely, yeah.
So doing work in the Gulf Stream, the Gulf Stream's not that far from us, but the Gulf Stream can be, and Mike last time when we talked with him, he talked about some of the challenges sometimes, the uniqueness of that environment. From an ecologist perspective, is that an easy place to work? Is it challenging? Or what are some of the tools that you use to do the work that you're doing in the Gulf Stream?
So first of all, remember, I get seasick, so that's a challenge. But luckily, I work with a team of wonderful people who are eager to go out and get onto the Gulf Stream. And I go as well sometimes, but sometimes it's more of a distraction than helpful. So that group usually goes out. It takes a lot of coordination. It takes a lot of planning, because you have to wait for weather windows. Luckily, I have a group, the Albatross fleet down in Hatteras, who take us out frequently, and they will reserve boats for us, which is wonderful. So it's not that much planning on that end, but when we have people who are involved in the sea turtle releases and things like that, we have people coming from everywhere waiting for this weather window where we can get out there.
Yeah.
And then they're very, very long days. So we typically leave here at about 5 a.m., get down to Hatteras, a couple hours later, and the team doesn't really get home until about 7. And because we're working with biological living samples, you really have to take care of them in that transport, and then you need to do all of your work with them in that really short period of time. So it's not uncommon for us to have a full 40-hour work week within 2 to 3 days.
Right, yeah.
And there have been several occasions where I have seen multiple sunrises without a rest in between them.
Sure.
But those are the times that I love my work.
Yeah, that could be, it's inspiring, right?
It's so inspiring.
Getting into the science, I think, is inspiring. I think you and your group sort of feels that way, and you often, that's what keeps you going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially, so I wanted to sort of transition the idea of the renewable ocean energy, and your sort of position as the associate director there does focus a lot on the environmental side, right? And so your work does, your research, right, does sort of add to that, but I think you're also doing quite a bit of other work that maybe isn't as inspiring as doing the research and getting in the lab, but I mean, it's important work thinking about the environmental impacts, and I just wonder if you could speak to some of the other things that you are having to do related to the Ocean Energy Program and sort of assessing the environment.
Yeah, so we have been very fortunate in the last couple of years to have more and more involvement with federal projects. So we have the Waves to Water competition being hosted at Jeanette's Pier soon, and we have other opportunities that we'll hear more about soon. But a lot of those federal partnerships, let's see, how do we even go about this? So our state program has a lot of leeway with environmental things, but it's the mission of our program to be stewards of our environment. And so that has, I think, made me eager to work with the program, and it also kind of gives us an in when we think about moving beyond just state waters and state programs because that is part of our mission. So all of the things that we have done to understand the environment, to make these environmental considerations, makes us a more desirable group to work with,
right.
because that's part of our mission. It's not just energy, it's being responsible stewards.
That's sort of the point I wanted to make, is that, we are really interested in renewables in our system and trying to move that research and that platform forward, but we're also really concerned about being stewards of the environment.
Right.
So that's pretty critical. So I mentioned already, you wear multiple hats, right? So one of those hats is now the director of the Outer Banks Field School. And as you started with, is that you've been a part of that for over a decade, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to give you an opportunity just to speak to it, because I've been talking a lot, and whenever I have the opportunity and given a platform, I talk about how we want to grow education opportunities out here for our partners, and that includes ECU as well as our other partners. And a lot of what we're doing is based significantly on what the Outer Banks Field School is and its mission. And so I thought maybe you could take a minute or so just to sort of speak to the Outer Banks Field School and how it engages with our community and sort of the significance it is for you.
Sure. Yeah. So the Outer Banks Field Site has kind of, over this past decade, it has morphed a little bit. And now our focus is integrated science and policy. And so a lot of our classes kind of approach the issues faced by coastal communities from different perspectives, from kind of management perspectives, human dimensions of ecology, ecosystem ecology, economics, law and policy, and then the students have opportunities to kind of apply what they're learning in those classes to a capstone research project. And that capstone research project always has some relevance or interest to the local community. So for the past 3 years, we've been working with the town of Nags Head to examine human perspectives and water quality issues surrounding septic systems. And that's important because wastewater is treated by septic systems in many rural and coastal locations, not just in Nags Head. Right. So that partnership kind of helps the students understand how what they're learning can be applied in the real world and what some of the challenges of applying things in the real world are, provides that context that we were talking about, and also builds connections with community groups. And
I think it's, I really appreciate the time it takes, the time that you put into that program. So again, you're wearing all of these hats. You just spoke about all sorts of different activities that you have going on, which take a lot of time. And you're clearly extremely dedicated to what you're doing, and I appreciate that for sure. But how do you create that balance, right? There's a lot of things that you have to juggle, right? And it's not just work related. How do you create that balance?
Yeah, balance is very elusive. It's always something that you have to check yourself on. And I do have a 5-year-old, hi Rowan, and I, have things that I enjoy doing in my free time. I really love work. I've always loved work. Yeah, and I'm also, I probably would work a lot more if I didn't have balance. But other than that, I think things like making sure that I have exercise and sleep, like keeping up a regular yoga practice, running, spending time with my son, playing outside, watching him discover the world, those are all things. And of course, with also spending time with my husband.
Plug for Corey.
Yeah, plug for Corey. And, we have dogs and cats, and so.
Well, it doesn't sound balanced. It sounds like you got a lot going on. It
is kind of like most of the time. I couldn't find my keys for half an hour today, but no, it's fun most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I certainly wanted to point out is that you were recently recognized by the Department of Energy for your contributions to education as it relates to the clean energy sector. And you got this well-deserved award that was the Clean Energy Education Empowerment Initiative, part of that initiative. And I thought, first, yeah, congratulations, right?
Thank you.
Again, well deserved, and I was really thrilled to see you recognized for that. I'm curious what that award might mean to you, and has it inspired you to do something new, or just what's the next step along sort of clean energy and education for you?
Well, it's inspired me a lot to do things new, to do new things. I haven't necessarily had time for all of them yet, but it has, sparked some ideas, and it has introduced me to a community of mostly women who are in clean energy, and that, we didn't get to have an in-person conference, I guess, this year, but we'll be able to have that hopefully sometime in the future. And so I'm really excited to be part of that network of women because, I haven't had all that many female people that I've worked with. We have far more females here now than we ever have before at CSI, and Nancy was here previously. But having that network of women who are kind of facing similar issues and having similar things to balance, and being part of a sector that is largely dominated by men,
sure.
that in and of itself has been really inspiring and uplifting to me, and just the validation from an award like that, made me feel great.
And again, congratulations.
Yeah,
that's
thank
great.
you.
And so, all right, so you've sort of hopefully inspired a lot of people here. I'm obviously excited about all that you're doing and your many accomplishments. But sort of to wrap it up, what sort of advice would you give? I mean, hopefully we have some young scientists, right? Up and coming scientists. What sort of advice might you give a young scientist?
Well, I think I've said over and over that I love what I do. I love my work, and I think following your interests, getting outside and exploring as many things as you can. And when I say outside, I mean literally outside, but also just like outside of your comfort zone. When you're in school or whatever, look for experiences. Any opportunity that comes your way, take it and do your best at it. Even if you find out minutes after you take it on that you absolutely detest it, still do your best, because you're going to take some sort of skill and experience and network away from that. And then also find your community of mentors and colleagues who you enjoy working with and who help keep you going.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good advice. And certainly it's advice that you model yourself. So that's great. All right. So I want to first thank you. Thank you for taking the time. But before we let Lindsay out of the hot seat, we're going to go to the questions. And so if you have any questions, please type those in. We got a couple already. But now's your time to ask Lindsay anything you want. All right. So first question. Let's see, get my glasses. What is the distance between the sargassum and the power that might be harnessed?
Between the Gulf Stream and the...
What is the distance between the sargassum and the power that might be harnessed?
Oh, I see. Okay. I think that maybe within the water column.
Within the water column.
Yeah.
Right.
So, there aren't that many global ocean current turbines out there. And I think that some of the ones that I was encouraged to think about when I first became involved in the Renewable Ocean Energy Program, they were thinking that they would be far below the water surface so that ships could pass over them. Right. So like 50 meters, I think, and then they have a... And
the depth of sargassum is...
It's right at the surface. It's probably the first 3 meters.
Maybe a couple meters.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Or, 6 feet-ish.
Right, sorry.
9 feet, 6, yeah.
Right. Yeah, certainly the upper 10 feet of the water column.
Yes. So they are separated, but the other day I was doing some research for a summer class that I teach, and I saw that there were turbines that were being developed, I think in Japan, that float at the surface of the water.
Wow.
And so, that would be right in the same place as the sargassum.
But it would also be right in the same place of shipping lanes and everything else.
Exactly.
And so there would be challenges associated with that anyway.
There would be, but there's
just
challenges.
Because they're developing it doesn't mean it's going to go in the Gulf Stream, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's all sorts of things you have to consider.
Yeah, and for them it would probably go in the Kuroshio current, but
right.
But yeah, we don't know what is going to be developed, but that's why we're kind of trying to understand what the possibilities are.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next question. How can your research possibly support emerging aquaculture in North Carolina coastal waters?
So my research with Sargassum especially, I guess, could help us understand some of the factors that are controlling the growth of the Sargassum. There has been research funded recently to explore using Sargassum as a biofuel and other macroalgae as a biofuel. And so I think, learning what factors are controlling the productivity and also the growth of all of the epiphytes on its surfaces, which then weigh it down and block the sunlight from reaching its leaves. I think that could probably be beneficial. And then otherwise, I don't think that anyone would want to eat Sargassum. It's very, very tough compared to other
Have you tried
algae.
it?
I have not. I did recently buy some kelp jerky though, and that was really good. But yeah.
So don't knock it.
Maybe.
Don't knock it.
Maybe we need to check
Although
that
the
out.
challenge there is, so it is protected habitat.
It is
But
protected
if we
habitat.
Were to be able to grow that through aquaculture, not harvesting it from the Gulf Stream.
Right, and I think that this is probably the point that I should point out. Even though it's protected in our environment, there are these massive blooms of Sargassum that are happening in the southern hemisphere and even in the Caribbean. And so it is actually killing wildlife in some places because it's growing so excessively.
Right. Sometimes too much of a good thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, here's another. Dr. Dubbs, you're so impressive and you've accomplished so much. What are some of your future goals? I told you it was the hot seat.
Oh, goodness. I am embarrassed to admit this, but I kind of roll with things. And like I said, I take opportunities as they arise. I am not as much of like a goal setter.
Although we have some big things coming up
We
that
do
you're going to be
have
busy
some-
in.
yes,
And those announcements will come later?
Yes, those announcements will come later.
You will be busy.
Yes, I will be very busy. And I would like to continue a lot of the research that I have going. I have a couple of new research projects started, including a biofouling project at Jeanette's Pier. I want to start doing some acoustic measurements at Jeanette's Pier to understand the soundscape.
We never got in. I mean, you're doing a lot of acoustic measurements sort of in the deeper waters that we didn't get into today.
Right.
Anyway. She's right. You're doing a
things.
lot, right?
Yeah.
A lot of accomplishments and still a lot more to do.
Yeah.
All right. How does sargassum reproduce?
It vegetatively reproduces. So it grows as it's out in the Gulf Stream. We think so until very recently, we didn't even know where it was originating.
Wow.
And there were some satellite imagery studies that helped us understand that, that kind of showed that it originated in around the coast of Florida and got caught up in these global currents, and then also accumulates in the Sargasso Sea in really massive quantities. And so it grows vegetatively, and once it gets completely colonized by these epiphytes, it gets so heavy that it sinks. Yeah.
Okay, here's one. This is a loaded question, maybe.
Oh, geez.
So thank you for sharing your experiences. What future opportunities exist for high school and community college students that would allow them to be exposed to the type of research that you do?
So
That's from the president of the College of the Albemarle.
Oh, okay.
That's why I said it's loaded.
Well, so I try and interact with high school students and community college students and graduate student. I try and do a lot of outreach, and so reach out to me.
Yeah.
I am happy to involve students in what I do to whatever capacity I can. And I do take interns in my lab on a regular basis, high school, but with COVID, we're not able to do that.
So the high school students, certainly there's opportunities for internships within our groups.
There are.
And we're always looking for good students, regardless of high school, community college,
Absolutely.
or undergrads
Yeah,
every 4 year.
And I think that with these new announcements, we're building this up so much.
That's right. They'll come back for more.
Yeah. I think that we are only growing our potential to involve a wider community in what we're doing.
Yep.
And so,
yeah, that's good. Thank you, Jack, for that question. All right, so I read a few years ago that there was commercial harvesting of sargassum. What are the implications of this environmentally?
So there was commercial harvesting of sargassum up until, gosh, I'm trying to remember when the resolution was passed to protect it. I think it was like 2012 or 2014. Oh geez. And I think that the implications of harvesting it are that there's so much life living within it and that relies on it, that you will have reductions in all of those organisms that rely on it for habitat and for productivity. And also we're finding that it's very important for nutrient cycling as well. The pelagic ocean is very nutrient deficient, so it is taking nitrogen out of the atmosphere, not the sargassum itself, but its epiphytes, and making it biologically available for growth.
Right. So I think I'll end with this question from Barry Dubs.
Oh my. Hi, Dad.
With all that you do, Dr. Dubs, how do you make me feel so welcome whenever I have a chance to visit? Keep up the interesting work.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thanks, Dad.
All right. And so, again, thank you. Thank you for sitting in the hot seat. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed it. I hope everybody at home enjoyed it. And we look forward to seeing you again at our next Meet the Scientist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.